Jake Morrison looked out the window of his office at the vast fields of golden wheat that stretched beyond the horizon. New Haven Colony had been his home for 8 years now. He watched his daughter Amy playing in the courtyard below, her laughter carrying on the warm afternoon breeze. This planet was perfect for humans. The soil was rich, the air was clean, and the weather was mild year-round. Jake had been the colony administrator since the first day they landed on Kepler 442b. He remembered when there were only 50 people here. Now New Haven was home to 50,000 humans who had made new lives on this distant world. They grew food, raised families, and built something beautiful together. His wife Lisa walked into the office carrying 2 cups of coffee. She smiled at him and set 1 cup on his desk. Lisa ran the agricultural division and knew more about farming than anyone on the planet. Together, they had turned this empty world into a thriving colony. The harvest numbers look great this year, Lisa said, sitting down across from his desk. We'll have enough food to trade with the other colonies and still have plenty left over. Jake nodded and reached for his coffee. That's when the alarms started screaming. The sound was deafening. Red lights flashed throughout the building. Jake had never heard this alarm before. It was the invasion alert that they had installed but hoped never to use. His hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication panel. All units, report status, Jake said into the microphone. His voice was steady, but his heart was racing. The responses came quickly. Unknown ships in orbit, reported the Space Monitoring Station. Large vessels, not human design. They're not responding to our communication attempts. Jake felt his stomach drop. They had always known this day might come. Earth had warned all the colonies that there were hostile alien species in the galaxy. But New Haven was so far from the main shipping routes. They thought they were safe here. Through the window, Jake could see people running in the streets. Some were heading for the emergency shelters. Others were just standing there, looking up at the sky in confusion and fear. Lisa, take Amy to the bunker, Jake said. His wife's face had gone pale, but she nodded and hurried toward the door. The first explosions came without warning. Bright green beams of energy struck the ground outside the colony center. The building shook, and Jake was thrown against the wall. When he looked outside again, he saw that an entire city block had been turned to smoking ruins. More beams rained down from the sky. Each one destroyed everything it touched. The aliens weren't targeting military installations. They were hitting homes, schools, and hospitals. They were killing civilians on purpose. Jake ran to the communication array on the roof. He had to warn the other colonies. He had to tell Earth what was happening here. The elevator wasn't working, so he ran up 12 flights of stairs. The roof was chaos. Smoke and fire filled the air. In the distance, he could see the alien ships hovering above the colony. They were huge, dark vessels that looked nothing like human technology. They fired their weapons with cold precision, turning New Haven into a graveyard. Jake reached the emergency transmitter and began recording his message. His hands were steady now. This was the most important thing he would ever do. This is Administrator Jake Morrison of New Haven Colony on Kepler 442b, he said into the recorder. We are under attack by unknown alien forces. They arrived without warning and began targeting civilian areas immediately. The attackers appear to be a highly advanced species with superior firepower. Another explosion rocked the building. Jake kept talking. The aliens are not interested in communication or surrender. This is genocide. They are systematically destroying every building and killing every person they can find. I estimate we have less than 2 hours before the colony is completely destroyed. Jake paused and looked out at his burning home. In the courtyard below, he could see alien soldiers moving through the streets. They were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large black eyes. They carried weapons that fired the same green energy beams as their ships. They shot every human they saw, including children. The attacking species appears to be what we might call the Zephyrians, based on the markings on their ships, Jake continued. They have superior technology and show no mercy. They are broadcasting their attack on some kind of communication network. I think they're treating this as entertainment. More alien soldiers entered the building below. Jake could hear them moving through the halls, their strange voices echoing up the stairwell. He didn't have much time left. I'm transmitting all the data we've collected about their ships and weapons, Jake said quickly. Maybe it will help our people fight back. The Zephyrians think humans are weak. They think we can't fight back. They're wrong. Jake heard the aliens climbing the stairs. They would reach the roof in minutes. He looked down at the emergency bunker where Lisa and Amy were hiding. The bunker was built to withstand bombing, but he didn't know if it would protect them from alien weapons. Tell my wife and daughter that I love them, Jake said into the recorder. Tell everyone on Earth that we died fighting. Tell them that New Haven will be remembered. And tell them that these aliens made a terrible mistake today. The door to the roof burst open. 3 Zephyrian soldiers stepped out, their weapons raised. They were even more frightening up close. Their black eyes showed no emotion at all. They looked at Jake like he was an insect. Jake kept his finger on the transmit button. The Zephyrians think they can do this to any human colony they want. They think we're easy targets. But they don't understand what they've started. When Earth finds out what happened here, there will be consequences. The lead alien fired his weapon. Jake felt the burning energy tear through his chest, but he managed to speak one last sentence into the recorder. Tell them we were here. Jake Morrison died on the roof of the Colony Administration building. His final transmission traveled across space toward Earth, carrying with it the last words of New Haven Colony and a warning about the species that had just declared war on humanity. Admiral Kate Sullivan was drinking her morning coffee when the communication alert sounded in her office at Earth Defense Command headquarters in Geneva. It was 6:30 in the morning, and the building was mostly empty. Kate had always been an early riser, preferring to get her work done before the chaos of the day began. The alert was marked as Priority 1, which meant it was either very important or someone had made a serious mistake. Kate had been in charge of Earth's defense forces for 6 years, and she had seen plenty of both. She activated the secure communication terminal and began downloading the transmission. The signal had traveled for 3 weeks across space to reach Earth. It came from New Haven Colony, one of the furthest human settlements from home. Kate recognized Jake Morrison's voice immediately. She had approved his appointment as colony administrator years ago. He was a good man, reliable and smart. But something was wrong with his voice. He sounded scared. As Kate listened to Jake's message, her coffee grew cold in her hands. She watched the video feed that came with his transmission. The images showed alien ships in the sky above New Haven, firing energy weapons at defenseless civilians. She saw children running in terror. She saw buildings collapsing into rubble. When Jake's transmission ended with the sound of alien weapons fire, Kate sat in silence for a long moment. Then she reached for her secure phone and dialed a number she had hoped never to use. "This is Admiral Sullivan," she said when the phone was answered. "I need to speak with President Miller immediately. We have a code red situation." 20 minutes later, Kate was in the White House Situation Room, along with President Frank Miller and his top advisors. The room was designed for moments like this, when Earth faced its greatest threats. Maps of human space covered the walls, and secure communication links connected them to military commanders across the solar system. President Miller was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been in office for 4 years, and he had always hoped that his presidency would be remembered for peace and prosperity. Now he was about to become a wartime president. "Show me what we're dealing with," President Miller said. Kate activated the large display screen and played Jake Morrison's transmission. The room fell silent as they watched the destruction of New Haven Colony. When the video ended, several people were wiping tears from their eyes. "How many people live there?" asked Dr. Sam Rodriguez, the government's chief expert on alien species. 50,000, Kate replied. "Men, women, and children. Farmers, teachers, engineers. They were completely defenseless." General Paul Hayes, the commander of Earth's space fleet, leaned forward in his chair. "What do we know about these Zephyrians?" Kate brought up a new display showing the technical data that Jake had transmitted about the alien ships. They have advanced energy weapons and faster-than-light travel. Their ships are larger and more powerful than anything we have. But they made one crucial mistake. What's that? President Miller asked. They let Jake transmit all this data before they killed him, Kate said. We know what their weapons look like, how their ships move, and what their soldiers wear. Jake Morrison gave us intelligence that could save millions of lives. Dr. Rodriguez was studying the images of the Zephyrian soldiers. They don't look particularly strong physically, he said. Tall and thin, probably from a low-gravity world. But their technology is definitely superior to ours. General Hayes stood up and walked to the map of human space. New Haven is here, he said, pointing to a star system on the edge of human territory. If the Zephyrians are moving toward Earth, they'll hit these colonies next. He pointed to several other star systems. President Miller looked around the room at his advisors. What are our options? We could try to evacuate the outer colonies, suggested Secretary of State Grace Martinez. Get our people out of harm's way. Where would we put 50 million people? General Hayes asked. And what message does that send? That humans run away when attacked? Kate had been studying the tactical information while the others talked. There's something else, she said. The Zephyrians broadcast their attack on New Haven across their empire. They turn genocide into entertainment. They want other species to see how they treat anyone who opposes them. The room fell silent again. President Miller stood up and walked to the window that looked out over Washington, D.C. Millions of people were starting their normal day, going to work and school, completely unaware that 50,000 humans had just been murdered by aliens. How long do we have? President Miller asked. General Hayes consulted his tactical computer. If they continue toward Earth at the same speed, they could reach our outer colonies in 6 months. Earth itself in 2 years. And our fleet? We have 300 ships spread across human space, General Hayes replied. Most of them are patrol vessels and cargo haulers. We have maybe 50 ships that could actually fight a war. Kate looked at the president. Sir, there's something you need to know. Something that's been classified above your clearance level until now. President Miller turned around, surprised. What are you talking about? For the past 15 years, we've been building a secret fleet, Kate said. The Nova-class battleships. We have 30 of them hidden in asteroid bases throughout the solar system. They're equipped with weapons and armor that make our regular ships look like toys. General Hayes stared at Kate in shock. How is that possible? I would have known about that. It was authorized by President Johnson before you took office, Kate explained to President Miller. The project was so secret that only a handful of people knew about it. We've been preparing for this day since we first made contact with alien species. President Miller sat down heavily in his chair. Show me. Kate activated another display. The screen showed images of massive warships unlike anything Earth had ever built. They were sleek and deadly, armed with weapons that could destroy entire city blocks with a single shot. Each Nova-class ship has enough firepower to take on 10 enemy vessels, Kate explained. They're designed specifically for fighting advanced alien species. Dr. Rodriguez was studying the ship specifications. This changes everything. We're not as defenseless as the Zephyrians think we are. President Miller looked around the room. So what do we do? Do we try to negotiate with these aliens? Kate shook her head. They killed 50,000 civilians for entertainment, sir. There's no negotiating with that. They've declared war on humanity. General Hayes was already making notes on his tactical computer. We need to mobilize every ship we have. Recall all our patrol vessels and cargo haulers. Convert civilian ships to military use if necessary. And the Nova fleet? President Miller asked. Kate stood up straight. We activate every ship and crew. We show the Zephyrians what happens when someone attacks innocent humans. President Miller looked at each person in the room, then nodded slowly. Very well. General Hayes, you have authorization to mobilize our entire fleet. Admiral Sullivan, prepare your Nova ships for combat. Dr. Rodriguez, I want to know everything about Zephyrian weaknesses. As the meeting ended and people filed out of the Situation Room, President Miller remained seated, staring at the image of New Haven colony burning. Kate stayed behind as well. How many people are going to die before this is over? President Miller asked quietly. Kate looked at the image of Jake Morrison on the screen, frozen in his final moment. I don't know, sir. But I can promise you this, the Zephyrians are going to regret the day they decided to attack humanity. Captain Maria Gonzalez was inspecting the mining equipment on her ship when the emergency broadcast reached her. She had been working the asteroid belt for 2 years, extracting precious metals from rocks that floated in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter. It was dangerous work, but it paid well, and Maria enjoyed the independence of running her own operation. The broadcast came through on all frequencies, interrupting her daily routine. President Miller's voice filled the ship's communication room, and Maria stopped what she was doing to listen. As she heard about the attack on New Haven colony, her blood ran cold. Maria had friends on New Haven. She had transported supplies there just 6 months ago. She remembered the children playing in the streets and the farmers proudly showing off their crops. Now they were all dead. When the broadcast ended, Maria looked at her mining ship with new eyes. The vessel was equipped with industrial cutting lasers, heavy-duty shields, and powerful engines. With some modifications, it could become a warship. She opened a communication channel to Earth Defense Command. This is Captain Maria Gonzalez of the mining vessel Rocky Mountain. I volunteer my ship and crew for military service. The response came back within an hour. Captain Gonzalez, report to Luna Station for immediate conversion to military specifications. Your ship has been designated HMS Rocky Mountain, auxiliary cruiser. Maria smiled grimly as she changed course toward the moon. The Zephyrians had just made their first mistake. They thought humans were weak farmers and miners. They were about to learn that humans could turn anything into a weapon. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of ships. Captain Ryan Kelly received the news while patrolling the Outer Rim in his stealth corvette. His ship was designed for reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, but it could also carry enough explosives to level a city block. Lieutenant Ben Parker was training Marine recruits on a military base when the call came. Ben had served in 3 colonial conflicts and knew how to fight. But this was different. This wasn't humans fighting humans over resources or territory. This was about survival. Ben gathered his Marines in the briefing room. Most of them were young, barely out of training. They had joined the military expecting to spend their careers keeping peace between human colonies. Now they were going to war against aliens who thought genocide was entertainment. Listen up, Ben told his troops. Everything has changed. We're not peacekeepers anymore. We're going to be the tip of the spear in humanity's first interstellar war. One of the younger Marines raised his hand. Sir, what do we know about fighting these aliens? Captain Ryan Kelly's stealth corvette drifted silently through the darkness of space, invisible to enemy sensors. 3 weeks had passed since the human fleet left Earth, and Ryan was leading the first strike against Zephyrian forces. His mission was simple: destroy everything the aliens needed to continue their war. Ryan had been watching the Zephyrian supply depot for 2 days. The facility was built on a small moon orbiting a gas giant, far from any major population centers. It was heavily defended, with patrol ships and orbital weapons platforms. The Zephyrians thought it was safe. They were wrong. Target analysis complete, reported Lieutenant Nina Clark, Ryan's tactical officer. Nina was young but brilliant, able to spot weaknesses in enemy defenses that others missed. The depot's shields have a rotation cycle. Every 6 minutes, there's a 2-second gap in coverage on the north side. Ryan nodded. 2 seconds wasn't much time, but it was enough. Weapons ready? Nuclear torpedoes armed and targeted, replied Sergeant Tom Anderson from the weapons console. Tom was a demolitions expert who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions. He understood that sometimes the only way to stop an enemy was to destroy everything they valued. Ryan watched the enemy patrol ships moving in their predictable patterns. The Zephyrians were confident and careless. They had conquered dozens of species over the centuries, and they expected this war to be just as easy as all the others. 30 seconds to the gap, Nina reported. Ryan felt his heart rate slow, the way it always did before combat. This was what he had trained for his entire adult life. All stations ready. Nina, start the countdown. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, gap opening, now. Ryan's ship fired 4 nuclear torpedoes in rapid succession. The weapons streaked through space at incredible speed, passing through the shield gap before the Zephyrians even knew they were under attack. The explosions lit up the dark side of the moon like new suns. The Zephyrian depot simply disappeared. One moment it was a massive complex capable of supplying an entire fleet. The next moment it was radioactive debris scattered across space. Direct hits on all targets, Tom reported with satisfaction. The depot is completely destroyed. Ryan was already plotting their escape course. Nina, any response from enemy forces? Patrol ships are moving to investigate, but they're too slow to catch us. I'm detecting no other threats. Ryan's ship slipped away into the darkness, leaving the Zephyrians to wonder how an entire military installation had been destroyed without warning. It was the first of many lessons humanity would teach them about warfare. 2 star systems away, Admiral Jack Harrison was learning about Zephyrian tactics the hard way. His battle group had encountered a patrol fleet of alien warships, and the engagement was not going according to plan. The Zephyrian ships were larger and more heavily armed than the human vessels. Their energy weapons could punch through standard armor with ease. But Admiral Harrison had advantages that the aliens didn't understand. All ships, execute Formation Delta, Harrison ordered over the communication network. Use their size against them. The human ships scattered like a flock of birds, moving in seemingly random patterns that confused the Zephyrian targeting computers. The alien vessels were powerful, but they were also slow and clumsy. They had been designed to intimidate weaker species, not to fight an enemy that refused to stand still. Captain Dan Foster commanded one of the human cruisers in Harrison's battle group. His ship was fast and maneuverable, equipped with weapons designed to exploit weaknesses in enemy armor. As the Zephyrian flagship turned to target another human ship, Dan saw his opportunity. Take us in close, Dan ordered his pilot. Right under their weapons. Dan's ship accelerated toward the massive alien vessel, flying so close to its hull that the enemy couldn't depress their guns enough to target them. Dan's crew fired armor-piercing missiles into the ship's reactor cores, causing internal explosions that tore the vessel apart from within. Zephyrian flagship destroyed, Dan reported to Admiral Harrison. Their command structure is falling apart. Without their flagship to coordinate their movements, the remaining Zephyrian ships became easy targets. The human fleet picked them off one by one, using speed and tactics to overcome superior firepower. Major Nina Clark was monitoring the battle from the fleet command ship. As the intelligence officer for the entire operation, she was responsible for analyzing Zephyrian behavior and predicting their next moves. The aliens are starting to adapt, Nina reported to Admiral Harrison. They're spreading their ships further apart to avoid our close-range attacks. Harrison studied the tactical display. Then we adapt too. Signal all ships to switch to long-range missile attacks. Show them that humans can fight at any distance. The human fleet changed tactics seamlessly, launching waves of guided missiles that weaved through Zephyrian defensive fire. The aliens tried to shoot down the incoming weapons, but human missile technology was more advanced than they expected. Colonel Julie Morgan was leading the ground assault on a Zephyrian outpost when she received word of the fleet victories. Her Marines had been fighting alien soldiers for 3 hours, and the battle was finally turning in humanity's favor. The Zephyrians were tall and thin, but they were also slower and weaker than humans. What they lacked in physical strength, they tried to make up for with superior weapons and armor. But Julie's Marines had been trained to fight enemies with better equipment. Use the terrain, Julie ordered her troops over the radio. Make them come to us. The human Marines took cover behind rocks and in trenches, forcing the Zephyrian soldiers to advance across open ground. Every time the aliens tried to rush their positions, they were cut down by precise rifle fire. Sergeant Tom Anderson led a squad of demolitions experts in a flanking maneuver around the alien positions. While the main force kept the Zephyrians busy, Tom's team planted explosives under their fortifications. Charges set, Tom reported. Everyone clear the blast zone. The explosions destroyed the alien defensive positions and killed dozens of Zephyrian soldiers. The survivors tried to retreat, but they were surrounded by human forces. Colonel Morgan accepted the surrender of the Zephyrian commander, a tall alien with gray skin and large black eyes. The creature looked at her with what might have been confusion. "You fight with honor," the alien said in broken English. "We did not expect this from your species." Julie looked at the alien soldier with disgust. "You murdered 50,000 civilians on New Haven. What did you expect?" General Mike Roberts was coordinating the overall ground campaign from his command ship. Reports were coming in from battlefields across Zephyrian space, and the pattern was becoming clear. Human forces were winning every engagement. "The aliens are requesting a ceasefire," reported his communication officer. Mike looked at the tactical display showing human victories across a dozen star systems. "Tell them we'll consider a ceasefire when they return all human prisoners and surrender unconditionally." The response came back quickly. "They say those terms are unacceptable." Mike smiled coldly. "Then tell them we'll keep destroying their forces until they change their minds." Captain Ryan Kelly was already preparing for his next mission. His stealth ship had successfully destroyed 3 more supply depots, and enemy morale was beginning to collapse. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that could strike anywhere at any time. "Next target is their communication relay," Nina reported. "If we destroy it, they'll lose contact with half their fleet." Ryan plotted the course to their next objective. "Then that's what we do." The Zephyrians wanted a war. Now they're getting one. As human forces continued their advance through Zephyrian space, the aliens began to realize the scope of their mistake. They had attacked what they thought was a weak, defenseless species. Instead, they had awakened a military machine that was more efficient and more ruthless than anything they had ever encountered. The war was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity had tasted Zephyrian blood, and they wanted more. Admiral Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the wreckage of another enemy fleet. His ships had won another decisive victory, and the path to the Zephyrian homeworld was opening before them. "Signal the fleet," Harrison ordered. All ships advanced to the next objective. The Zephyrians wanted to see human warfare. "Let's show them what we're really capable of." Engineer Lucy Davis stood in the captured Zephyrian weapons facility, studying the alien technology with intense focus. 3 months into the war, human forces had overrun dozens of enemy installations, and Lucy's job was to figure out how their weapons worked. More importantly, she needed to figure out how to use them against their creators. Lucy had always been good with machines. As a child, she took apart radios and computers just to see how they worked. Now she was taking apart the most advanced alien technology in the galaxy, and what she found surprised her. "The Zephyrians aren't as advanced as we thought," Lucy told Commander Steve Williams, who was overseeing the facility's capture. "Their weapons are powerful, but they're also simple. They rely on brute force instead of clever engineering." Steve looked at the alien energy rifle that Lucy had disassembled on her workbench. "Can we modify them for human use?" Lucy smiled and picked up another weapon that she had been working on. It looked like a Zephyrian rifle, but she had made several modifications to its internal components. "Better than that. I can make them more effective than the original versions." Lucy demonstrated by firing the modified weapon at a target across the room. The energy beam that emerged was brighter and more focused than anything the Zephyrians had produced. The target was completely vaporized. "How did you do that?" Steve asked, impressed. "Human engineering," Lucy explained. "The Zephyrians build their weapons to last for centuries, so they over-engineer everything. I stripped out the unnecessary parts and focused the energy output. This weapon is twice as powerful as the original, and it weighs half as much." Word of Lucy's modifications spread quickly through the human fleet. Within weeks, every human soldier was carrying improved Zephyrian weapons. The aliens found themselves being killed by their own technology, made better by human ingenuity. Dr. Emma Thompson was working on a different kind of weapon. As a psychologist specializing in alien species, Emma's job was to understand how the Zephyrians thought and how to use that knowledge against them. Emma had been studying captured Zephyrian communications and propaganda broadcasts. What she discovered was disturbing but useful. The Zephyrians were a hierarchical species that valued dominance above all else. They conquered other species not just for resources, but to prove their superiority. They see war as a form of entertainment, Emma explained to Vice Admiral Carl Johnson during a strategy meeting. The attack on New Haven wasn't just about killing humans. It was about showing the galaxy that Zephyrians are the dominant species. Carl studied the psychological profile that Emma had prepared. How do we use this against them? Emma pulled up a series of propaganda broadcasts that human forces had been transmitting into Zephyrian space. We show them losing. Every time we win a battle, we broadcast it across their empire. We make sure every Zephyrian knows that humans are defeating them. The psychological warfare campaign was devastatingly effective. Zephyrian morale began to collapse as news of human victories spread throughout their empire. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians began to rebel, inspired by humanity's success. Commander Steve Williams was leading the siege of a major Zephyrian fortress world when the first rebellion broke out. The planet's native population, which had been enslaved by the Zephyrians for decades, rose up against their oppressors. "Sir, we're receiving communications from the planet's surface," reported his communication officer. "The local population is asking for our help." Steve looked at the tactical display showing the heavily fortified Zephyrian positions. A direct assault would cost thousands of human lives. But if the local population was willing to help, the odds changed dramatically. "Open a channel to the rebel leaders," Steve ordered. "Let's see what we can do together." The combined assault was a masterpiece of coordination. While human ships bombarded Zephyrian positions from orbit, local rebels attacked from within the fortress walls. The aliens found themselves fighting on two fronts against enemies who knew their weaknesses. Captain Maria Gonzalez had converted her mining ship into a formidable warship, and she was proving that human creativity could overcome superior technology. Her vessel wasn't designed for combat, but Maria had found ways to make it deadly. Maria's ship carried industrial mining lasers that could cut through asteroid rock. Against Zephyrian armor, they were devastatingly effective. She also used her mining charges as improvised missiles, turning tools of construction into weapons of war. "Target their engine systems," Maria ordered her crew as they approached another Zephyrian vessel. "We don't need to destroy them. We just need to stop them." Maria's unconventional tactics confused the enemy. They expected human warships to fight like warships. They didn't know how to respond to a mining vessel that fought like a predator, striking at vital systems and disappearing before they could respond. General Mike Roberts was coordinating the liberation of an entire star system when he received reports that changed everything. Human forces had discovered something unexpected in the captured Zephyrian archives, records of other species that had fought against the aliens. "The Zephyrians have been doing this for centuries," Mike explained to his staff during a briefing. "They've conquered dozens of species across the galaxy. But here's the interesting part, some of those species are still alive." The archives revealed that the Zephyrians had a policy of keeping conquered populations as slaves rather than exterminating them completely. Millions of beings from dozens of species were scattered across the Zephyrian Empire, waiting for liberation. This discovery changed human strategy completely. Instead of simply defeating the Zephyrians, humans began liberating their conquered territories and forming alliances with the freed populations. The war became a galactic revolution against Zephyrian oppression. Lieutenant Ben Parker led a Marine unit that specialized in liberating slave camps. His troops had developed tactics specifically for rescuing prisoners without alerting their guards. It was dangerous work, but Ben had never lost a prisoner during a rescue operation. "Remember, speed and silence," Ben told his Marines as they prepared for another mission. "The Zephyrians will kill their prisoners if they think they're going to lose them. We go in fast, eliminate the guards, and get everyone out before reinforcements arrive." Ben's unit had liberated thousands of prisoners across a dozen worlds. Each successful rescue provided humanity with new allies and valuable intelligence about Zephyrian operations. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as human and allied forces prepared for the largest offensive of the war. 6 months after the destruction of New Haven, humanity commanded a coalition of dozens of species, all united in their hatred of Zephyrian oppression. Fleet status report, Kate requested. 200 human ships ready for combat, reported her tactical officer. 300 allied vessels from liberated species. Enemy forces are concentrated around their core systems. Kate looked at the star charts showing the final advance toward Zephyrian space. The aliens had retreated to their most heavily defended systems, but they were running out of places to hide. Signal all ships, Kate ordered. Today we begin the final phase of this war. The Zephyrians wanted to prove they were the dominant species in the galaxy. Instead, they've proven that bullies always fall when good people stand together. The response came back from 500 ships representing dozens of species. Ready to advance, Admiral. Roy Smith watched from his engineering station as the Nova-class battleships prepared for their first major engagement. His ships had performed perfectly during the smaller battles, but this would be their ultimate test. All Nova ships report ready for combat, Roy announced to Admiral Sullivan. Weapons charged, shields at maximum, engines running at optimal efficiency. Kate nodded with satisfaction. Excellent work, Chief. Your ships are going to end this war. As the massive fleet moved toward the heart of Zephyrian space, Lucy Davis was putting the finishing touches on her latest project. She had been working with alien engineers to create new weapons that combined the best of human and alien technology. This should level the playing field, Lucy said as she demonstrated her newest creation. It was a ship-mounted weapon that fired concentrated energy beams powerful enough to destroy enemy vessels with a single shot. The weapon used Zephyrian energy technology, but with human targeting systems and efficiency improvements. It was more accurate and more powerful than anything either species had created alone. Dr. Emma Thompson was monitoring Zephyrian communications as the human fleet advanced. The psychological impact of humanity's victories was becoming clear in enemy transmissions. They're starting to panic, Emma reported. Zephyrian commanders are abandoning their positions. Some are even defecting to our side. The war that had begun with the destruction of a peaceful human colony was turning into a complete collapse of the Zephyrian Empire. Humanity had not just defeated their enemies, they had inspired a galactic revolution that would reshape the balance of power for generations to come. Captain Dan Foster stood in the docking bay of his ship, watching as his boarding team prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The target was the Zephyrian flagship Dominion, a massive vessel that served as the command center for their remaining fleet. Intelligence reports indicated that the ship's commander, Admiral Thexlaw himself, was aboard. Dan had led dozens of boarding operations during the war, but this one was different. The Dominion wasn't just another enemy ship. It was the symbol of Zephyrian power, and capturing it would send a message across the galaxy that no alien fortress was beyond human reach. Remember, we want prisoners, Dan told his team. Especially their command staff. Dead aliens can't tell us where they're hiding their remaining forces. Sergeant Tom Anderson checked his weapons one final time. His demolitions expertise had been crucial in previous boarding operations, allowing human forces to breach enemy ships that seemed impregnable. What about resistance, sir? Expect heavy fighting, Dan replied. The Zephyrians know what happens to their commanders when we capture them. They'll fight to the death rather than face trial for war crimes. Dan's assault ship approached the Dominion under cover of a massive space battle. Human and allied forces were engaging the Zephyrian fleet across a wide area, keeping the enemy distracted while the boarding operation commenced. The Dominion's armor was thick, but Tom's shaped charges punched through it like paper. Dan's team poured through the breach into the alien ship's corridors, moving with the precision that came from months of combat experience. The Zephyrian crew fought desperately to repel the boarders. Their energy weapons lit up the ship's passages with deadly light, but the human soldiers had trained for this kind of close-quarters combat. They used the ship's own architecture against its defenders, turning corners and doorways into defensive positions. Deck 3 secured, reported one of Dan's squad leaders. Moving toward the command center. Dan pushed forward with the main assault force, fighting through increasingly desperate Zephyrian resistance. The aliens had set up multiple defensive lines, but human tactics and modified Zephyrian weapons proved unstoppable. When Dan's team finally reached the ship's command center, they found Admiral Thexlaw waiting for them. The Zephyrian commander was tall even by his species standards, with ceremonial markings that indicated his high rank within their military hierarchy. "I will not surrender to inferior beings," Thexlaw declared, raising his weapon. Dan didn't give him the chance to fire. A single shot from his modified energy rifle dropped the alien commander. "Secure the bridge," Dan ordered his team. "And get me access to their communication systems." Colonel Julie Morgan was leading the liberation of a slave camp on the planet's surface when news of the flagship's capture reached her. The camp held over 10,000 prisoners from a dozen different species, all of whom had been worked nearly to death in Zephyrian mines. Julie's Marines had surrounded the camp at dawn, moving silently through the alien facility's perimeter defenses. The guards were overconfident and careless, never expecting an attack on what they considered a secure facility. "On my signal," Julie whispered into her radio. "Remember, the prisoners are the priority. Don't let the guards harm them." The attack was swift and brutal. Human Marines struck simultaneously from multiple directions, overwhelming the Zephyrian guards before they could react. Within minutes, the camp was under human control. Julie walked through the prisoner barracks, seeing firsthand the cruelty that the Zephyrians had inflicted on their captives. The beings inside were barely alive, kept in conditions that would have been considered torture on any civilized world. "Medical teams forward," Julie ordered. "Get these people the help they need." Among the prisoners, Julie found a group that made her heart race: humans from New Haven Colony. Lisa Morrison and her daughter Amy were among the survivors, having been captured when the colony was destroyed months earlier. "Are you Lisa Morrison?" Julie asked gently, kneeling beside the woman who had been the colony's agricultural engineer. Lisa looked up with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "Yes. Are you here to rescue us?" "We're here to take you home," Julie replied. "All of you." As medical teams worked to stabilize the rescued prisoners, Julie received reports from liberation operations across the planet. Hundreds of camps were being overrun by human forces, and millions of beings were being freed from Zephyrian slavery. General Mike Roberts watched from his command ship as human forces completed the conquest of another Zephyrian stronghold. The planet below had been one of their major industrial centers, producing weapons and equipment for their fleet. Now it was in human hands. "Sir, we're receiving surrender offers from 3 more Zephyrian systems," reported his communication officer. "They're asking for terms." Mike looked at the tactical display showing the collapse of Zephyrian resistance across their empire. "Tell them the same thing we told the others. Unconditional surrender, war crimes trials for their leadership, and reparations for their victims." The response came back quickly. "They say the terms are too harsh." Mike smiled coldly. "Then they can join their friends in the prisoner camps. Signal the fleet to continue the advance." Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the captured bridge of the Dominion, studying the Zephyrian fleet dispositions that Dan Foster's team had extracted from the ship's computers. The intelligence was invaluable, revealing the locations of hidden bases and supply depots throughout enemy space. "They've been lying about their strength," Kate told her staff. "According to these records, they only have about 60 ships left in their entire fleet." Vice Admiral Carl Johnson studied the data with interest. "That's less than half of what our intelligence estimated. They've been using deception to make us think they were stronger than they really are." Kate nodded. "Classic Zephyrian tactics. They've always relied on intimidation rather than actual strength. But we've called their bluff." The war was entering its final phase. Zephyrian resistance was crumbling as human forces systematically dismantled their empire. Species that had been conquered centuries ago were joining the human-led coalition, eager for revenge against their former oppressors. Engineer Lucy Davis had established workshops on every liberated world, teaching local engineers how to modify captured Zephyrian technology. Her innovations were spreading throughout the coalition, giving every species access to advanced weapons and defensive systems. The key is efficiency, Lucy explained to a group of alien engineers. Zephyrian technology is powerful, but it's wasteful. By removing unnecessary components and optimizing the energy flow, you can double the effectiveness of their weapons. The liberated species were eager students, and soon they were producing modified weapons that surpassed anything the Zephyrians had ever created. The empire that had once ruled through technological superiority was being defeated by their own technology, improved by the creativity of their former victims. Dr. Emma Thompson's psychological warfare campaign was having devastating effects on Zephyrian morale. Broadcasts showing human victories and Zephyrian defeats were being transmitted across their empire, undermining their government's authority and inspiring further rebellions. Their entire social structure is based on the belief that they're superior to other species, Emma explained to Admiral Sullivan. When that belief is shattered, everything else collapses with it. Captain Ryan Kelly continued his stealth operations, striking at Zephyrian facilities across their shrinking territory. His success rate was perfect, every target he attacked was completely destroyed. The aliens had learned to fear the silent death that could come from anywhere. Next target is their main shipyard, Nina reported as they approached another hidden facility. If we destroy it, they won't be able to build any more warships. Ryan studied the target through his ship's sensors. The shipyard was massive, capable of producing dozens of vessels simultaneously. Destroying it would cripple what remained of Zephyrian military production. Load the heavy charges, Ryan ordered. Let's make sure they never build another ship again. Lieutenant Ben Parker's Marine unit was spearheading the advance toward the Zephyrian homeworld. His troops had fought in dozens of battles, and their reputation for efficiency and ruthlessness had spread throughout both armies. The aliens are trying to establish a defensive line around their core systems, Ben told his Marines during a briefing. They're hoping to make us pay such a high price that we'll agree to a negotiated peace. One of his soldiers raised his hand. What are our orders, sir? Ben looked at the image of New Haven colony that he kept on his command tablet, a reminder of why they were fighting. No mercy. No quarter. The Zephyrians chose to make this war total when they murdered civilians for entertainment. Now they get to live with the consequences. As human forces prepared for the final assault on Zephyrian space, the aliens made one last desperate attempt to avoid total defeat. They broadcast a message across the galaxy, claiming that they were willing to negotiate a peace settlement. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the message on the bridge of her flagship. She read it carefully, then handed it to her communication officer. Send them our response, Kate ordered. Tell them that the time for negotiation ended when they destroyed New Haven colony. Tell them that humanity is coming, and we're bringing justice with us. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship as the largest fleet in galactic history approached Zephyr Prime, the homeworld of the Empire that had murdered 50,000 innocent humans. 8 months had passed since the destruction of New Haven colony, and now humanity had come to collect the debt. The fleet was massive beyond imagination. 600 human warships surrounded by over 1,000 vessels from liberated alien species. The combined force represented every civilization that had suffered under Zephyrian oppression, all united under human leadership in the final assault. Fleet status report, Kate requested. All human vessels ready for combat, reported her tactical officer. Allied ships are maintaining formation. The blockade is complete. Nothing can leave or enter Zephyrian space. Kate looked at the image of Zephyr Prime on her main screen. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents that reminded her of Earth. It was hard to believe that such a peaceful-looking world was home to a species that considered genocide to be entertainment. Open a communication channel to the planet, Kate ordered. All frequencies. Supreme Commander Thexla, the highest-ranking Zephyrian leader, appeared on the screen. He was an imposing figure even in defeat, tall and gray with the ceremonial markings of his rank. But Kate could see fear in his large black eyes. Admiral Sullivan, Thexla said in heavily accented English. I request that we discuss terms for ending this conflict. Kate looked at the alien leader with cold anger. The time for discussion ended when your forces attacked New Haven colony. You turned genocide into entertainment. You broadcast the murder of 50,000 civilians across your empire. There are no terms to discuss. Thexla seemed to struggle with the concept. But surely you do not intend to destroy our entire civilization? We are willing to make compromises. We're not here to destroy your civilization, Kate replied. We're here to demand justice. You will surrender unconditionally. Your leaders will stand trial for war crimes. Your empire will pay reparations to every species you've conquered. These are not negotiations. These are the consequences of your actions. The alien commander's composure began to crack. You cannot expect us to simply surrender everything we have built over centuries. Kate activated another display showing footage from liberated slave camps, images of prisoners barely alive after years of torture and abuse. This is what you built over centuries. Suffering on an unimaginable scale. The galaxy is better off without your empire. President Frank Miller appeared on a secondary screen, joining the conversation from Earth. Commander Thexla, this is President Miller of Earth. Admiral Sullivan speaks with the full authority of humanity and our allies. You have 24 hours to begin surrendering your forces. After that, we will take what we came for by force. Thexla looked between the two human leaders, clearly struggling to understand how his mighty empire had been brought to its knees by what he had considered an inferior species. And if we refuse? Kate gestured toward the massive fleet surrounding his homeworld. Then you'll share the fate you intended for humanity. The choice is yours. Ambassador Grace Martinez had spent the past month preparing for this moment. As humanity's chief diplomat, she was responsible for managing the political aspects of the Zephyrian surrender. The work was complex, involving not just the aliens but also dozens of liberated species that wanted their voices heard. The evidence against Zephyrian leadership is overwhelming, Grace reported to President Miller during a secure conference call. We have testimony from thousands of witnesses, video evidence of atrocities, and documentation of systematic oppression spanning centuries. President Miller reviewed the files that Grace had compiled. What about the war crimes trials? We've established an international court with judges from every liberated species, Grace replied. The proceedings will be broadcast across the galaxy to ensure transparency. This isn't just about punishing the Zephyrians. It's about establishing a new standard of justice that will prevent future genocides. War crimes prosecutor Alan Cooper had spent his entire career preparing for cases like this. He had prosecuted human war criminals in conflicts across Earth's colonies, but nothing had prepared him for the scope of Zephyrian atrocities. The evidence is staggering, Alan told his legal team. The Zephyrians didn't just conquer other species. They systematically destroyed their cultures, enslaved their populations, and used torture as a form of entertainment. Some of their crimes don't even have names in human law. Alan's team had been working around the clock to document the charges against Zephyrian leadership. The list included genocide, crimes against humanity, torture, slavery, and dozens of other offenses that span centuries of oppression. The challenge isn't proving their guilt, Alan continued. The challenge is making sure the trials are fair and just. We can't let our anger compromise the principles we're fighting to defend. Colonel Helen Wade was leading the ground forces that would occupy Zephyr Prime once the surrender was complete. Her troops were specially trained for peacekeeping operations, but they were also prepared for combat if the Zephyrians chose to resist. Remember, we're not conquerors, Helen told her officers during a final briefing. We're liberators. Our job is to maintain order while the transition to new leadership takes place. The Zephyrian people aren't our enemies. Their government is. Helen's forces included not just human soldiers but also troops from every liberated species. Many of them were former slaves who had volunteered to help establish justice on the world that had been the center of their oppression. Captain Dan Foster was monitoring Zephyrian communications from his position in the fleet. His team had become experts at intercepting and decoding alien transmissions, and what they were hearing revealed the complete collapse of Zephyrian morale. They're in full panic, Dan reported to Admiral Sullivan. Military units are abandoning their posts. Government officials are trying to flee the planet. Some are even offering to surrender personally in exchange for leniency. Kate studied the intelligence reports with satisfaction. Any sign of organized resistance? Negative, Dan replied. They know they're beaten. The question now is whether their leadership will accept reality or force us to take the planet by storm. General Mike Roberts had positioned his invasion forces for a rapid assault if negotiations failed. His troops were ready to land on Zephyr Prime within hours of receiving the order, but he hoped it wouldn't be necessary. Landing zones secured, Mike reported to Admiral Sullivan. If they force our hand, we can have boots on the ground before they know what hit them. Mike had led ground forces through dozens of battles during the war, but an assault on the Zephyrian homeworld would be different. It would be the final act of a conflict that had reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy. 18 hours into the ultimatum, Supreme Commander Thexlaw appeared on communication screens throughout the human fleet. His appearance had changed dramatically since their last conversation. The proud alien leader now looked broken and defeated. Admiral Sullivan, Thexlaw said quietly. The Zephyrian High Council has voted to accept your terms. We surrender unconditionally. Kate felt a moment of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the memory of all those who had died to reach this moment. Very well. Begin by ordering all your military forces to stand down. Any ship or installation that shows resistance will be destroyed. Thexlaw nodded slowly. It will be done. I have prepared a list of government officials who are responsible for the attack on your colony. They will present themselves for arrest within the hour. President Miller joined the conversation from Earth. Commander Thexlaw, this day marks the end of an empire built on oppression and the beginning of a new era of justice in this galaxy. Future generations will judge both of our species by how we handle what comes next. The surrender proceeded smoothly. Zephyrian forces laid down their weapons without resistance. Government officials turned themselves into human authorities. The mighty empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries simply ended. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from orbit as human and allied forces landed on Zephyr Prime. There was no fighting, no desperate last stands. The Zephyrians had finally understood that their time was over. Admiral, her communication officer reported, we're receiving surrender messages from the last Zephyrian holdouts throughout their empire. The war is over. Kate looked at the image of New Haven colony that she kept on her personal display. Jake Morrison and 50,000 innocent people had died 8 months ago, but their deaths had not been in vain. Their sacrifice had united the galaxy against oppression and established humanity as a force for justice among the stars. Signal all ships, Kate ordered. The blockade will remain in place until the transition is complete. We came here for justice, and we're not leaving until we have it. As the sun set on the Zephyrian Empire, the sun was rising on a new galactic order. Humanity had proven that even the mightiest tyrants could be brought to justice when good people stood together. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the surrender of the Zephyrian Empire, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. President Frank Miller stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Harmony Station, preparing to address representatives from over 100 species. It was humanity's first appearance before the galaxy's governing body, and every word would be carefully analyzed. The council chamber was enormous, with seating arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats, many of them seeing humans for the first time. Some looked curious, others fearful, but all were paying close attention. Honored delegates, President Miller began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. 6 months ago, humanity was an unknown species on the edge of galactic civilization. Today, we stand before you as the leaders of a coalition that has fundamentally changed the balance of power in this galaxy. Miller paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Many of them had been victims of Zephyrian oppression, while others had been allies or trading partners of the fallen empire. All of them wanted to know what humanity planned to do with its newfound power. We did not seek this role, Miller continued. We were peaceful farmers and colonists who wanted only to build new lives on distant worlds. But when the Zephyrians attacked our colony and murdered 50,000 innocent people, they forced us to become something else. They turned us into liberators. Ambassador Tony Lewis sat in the human delegation section, monitoring the reactions of the other species representatives. As humanity's chief ambassador to the Galactic Council, Tony had spent months building relationships with alien diplomats. The work was delicate, requiring him to balance humanity's interests with the needs of dozens of other species. Tony had learned that galactic politics were far more complex than Earth's international relations. Some species communicated through chemical signals, others through color changes, and a few didn't communicate at all in ways that humans could understand. But they all understood power, and humanity now had more of it than any other species in the galaxy. The human delegation has prepared a comprehensive proposal for galactic governance, Tony announced when President Miller finished his opening remarks. We believe it's time to establish new institutions that can prevent the kind of atrocities committed by the Zephyrian Empire. The proposal was ambitious. It called for the creation of a galactic defense force that would protect smaller species from conquest, a universal court of justice that would prosecute war crimes, and an economic development council that would help liberated worlds rebuild their civilizations. Amy Morrison stood in the Memorial Garden on New Haven, now 20 years old and serving as the director of the rebuilt colony's Memorial Center. The garden was beautiful, with flowers and trees from dozens of worlds creating a living testament to galactic cooperation. But at its center stood a simple black stone wall with 50,000 names carved into its surface. Amy ran her fingers over her father's name, carved near the top of the memorial. Jake Morrison had become a symbol of human determination and sacrifice, his final transmission inspiring millions of people across the galaxy. But to Amy, he was just her father, the man who had died protecting his family and his people. "Your father would be proud," said a voice behind her. Amy turned to see Lisa Morrison, her mother, approaching with a small group of visitors. Lisa now served as the colony's administrator, the same position her husband had held when he died. The visitors were young Zephyrians, part of a cultural exchange program that had been established to help rebuild relations between the species. They moved carefully through the memorial garden, clearly uncomfortable but determined to understand the consequences of their empire's actions. "I want to apologize," said one of the young aliens, speaking in careful English. "What my people did here was wrong. We are trying to build a better society, but we know it will take many generations to earn forgiveness." Amy looked at the young Zephyrian with a mixture of sadness and hope. "My father's last words were, 'Tell them we were here.' He wanted people to remember what happened here, but he also wanted people to learn from it. That's why we're all here together." Historian Dr. Karen White was working in the memorial's research center, documenting the complete history of the war for future generations. Her work was painstaking, involving interviews with thousands of survivors and analysis of millions of documents. But she believed it was crucial to preserve the truth about what had happened. "The war changed everything," Karen explained to a group of student researchers. "Before the Zephyrian attack, humans were just another small species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. Afterward, we became the dominant military power and the leaders of a galactic coalition. But the real change was philosophical." Karen pulled up a display showing population statistics from across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, a major power is using its strength to protect smaller species rather than conquer them. Humanity has proven that might doesn't have to make right. On Earth, the trials of Zephyrian war criminals were entering their final phase. War crimes prosecutor Alan Cooper had spent months presenting evidence of atrocities that spanned centuries. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, ensuring that every species could see justice being done. Supreme Commander Thexlaw sat in the defendant's chair, his once proud bearing now replaced by resignation. The evidence against him was overwhelming: video testimony from thousands of victims, documentary evidence of systematic oppression, and his own recorded orders to attack civilian targets. The defendant stands accused of genocide, crimes against humanity, torture, slavery, and crimes against peace, Allen announced to the packed courtroom. The evidence shows that he personally ordered the destruction of New Haven Colony and the murder of 50,000 innocent civilians. The trial had lasted 6 months, with testimony from survivors of dozens of worlds. The alien victims spoke in their own languages, their words translated for the human audience. Their stories were heartbreaking but necessary to establish the full scope of Zephyrian crimes. Chief Engineer Roy Smith was overseeing the decommissioning of the Nova-class battleships now that the war was over. The Secret Fleet had performed flawlessly during the conflict, but humanity's leaders had decided that such powerful weapons were too dangerous to keep active during peacetime. It's strange, Roy told his engineering team as they prepared to mothball the ships. We spent 15 years building these vessels in secret, they fought for less than a year, and now we're putting them back into storage. But maybe that's how it should be. The best weapons are the ones you never have to use. Some of the Nova ships would be converted to exploration vessels, their weapons replaced with scientific equipment. Others would be kept in reserve, hidden away but ready if humanity ever again faced an existential threat. The galaxy had learned that humans were capable of building devastating weapons when necessary. Admiral Kate Sullivan had retired from active duty and now served as the director of the Galactic Defense Academy, training officers from dozens of species in the principles of humanitarian warfare. The academy was located on a neutral world, and its mission was to ensure that future conflicts would be fought according to civilized rules. War is sometimes necessary, Kate told her students during a lecture on military ethics. But it should never be entertainment. The moment you start enjoying the suffering of your enemies, you become no better than the tyrants you're fighting against. Kate's students came from across the galaxy, representing species that had been both allies and enemies during the recent war. Young Zephyrians sat next to human officers, learning together how to prevent future conflicts. Captain Ryan Kelly had returned to civilian life, using his stealth ship for exploration rather than warfare. He had discovered 3 new habitable worlds in the past 6 months, each one offering opportunities for peaceful settlement. The galaxy was vast, with room for every species to find their place. The universe is full of wonders, Ryan told his crew as they approached another uncharted system. We spent so much time fighting that we almost forgot why we came to the stars in the first place. We came to explore, to discover, to build something better than what we had on Earth. The Galactic Council voted unanimously to approve humanity's governance proposal. The new institutions would be funded by reparations from the former Zephyrian Empire and staffed by representatives from every member species. It was an unprecedented experiment in interstellar cooperation. President Miller signed the charter establishing the new galactic order in a ceremony attended by representatives from across the galaxy. The document was inscribed on metal from asteroids in the New Haven system, ensuring that the memory of the fallen colony would be preserved forever. Today we establish institutions that will protect the innocent and punish the guilty, Miller declared. We do this not because we are strong, but because we remember what it felt like to be weak. We remember New Haven, and we will never let such a tragedy happen again. As the ceremony concluded, Amy Morrison read the final words that her father had transmitted before his death. Tell them we were here. Those words had become humanity's motto, a reminder that every life had value and every sacrifice had meaning. The galaxy was entering a new age, one defined not by conquest and oppression but by cooperation and justice. The Zephyrian Empire was gone, its leaders facing the consequences of their crimes. In its place rose a new order built on the principles that Jake Morrison and 50,000 other humans had died defending. Humanity had come to the stars as explorers and farmers. They had been forced to become warriors and liberators. Now they were something else entirely, the guardians of galactic civilization, protectors of the weak, and champions of justice among the stars. The war was over, but its legacy would endure forever. Never again would any species be able to commit genocide for entertainment. Never again would the strong be allowed to prey upon the weak without consequence. The galaxy had learned what happened when humans said, enough. And in the memorial garden on New Haven, where flowers from 100 worlds bloomed under an alien sun, children played in the shadow of a wall that bore 50,000 names. They played without fear, protected by the knowledge that their parents and grandparents had built a safer galaxy with their sacrifice. Jake Morrison's final transmission had reached its destination. The galaxy knew that humanity had been there, and it would never forget.